Okay, hello, 12s. So, moving on to the next unit, which is respiration. This unit is closely linked to our previous unit, which was circulation. And if you remember the job of the circulatory system, there was a whole bunch. There was maintaining temperature, immunity, and one of the jobs was also carrying oxygen to all the cells in the body and picking up metabolic wastes like carbon dioxide, etc., and carrying those out. Now, how does that oxygen get into the body, and how does carbon dioxide get out of the body? That is our topic now, which is respiration. That's the answer, is respiration. So if you think about why do we have to have respiration? Why do we do all of this? Well, it's to bring enough oxygen into the body and to get enough carbon dioxide out of the body so that we can continue living, doing metabolism, our cells doing the things that they do. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about respiration. So when we talk about respiration, we have to talk about breathing. So what is breathing? So breathing is the taking in of air and the pushing out, or the exhalation of air, the inspiration of air and the expiration of air. You inhale and you exhale, or you inspire and you expire. When you actually will expire, that will be the final thing that you do. That's it. Okay, so that's breathing. Breathing, taking in of air, taking out of air. How does the air go in? Well, we have some specialized structures in our body, and we'll go into more of the detail about breathing in a sec. But let's just talk about sort of the anatomy and what happens. I think that's a good idea. So, air enters. Enters through the hole there, through in the nose. You got a nasal cavity. We can also breathe through our mouths. Not all animals can breathe through their mouths, obviously, or not all mammals can breathe through their mouths. But we can, and it, of course, produces a problem because food can end up going down our trachea and into our lungs, and that would be bad. But we can cough it out. So we have this little structure here, if you remember from our digestion unit, this is called the epiglottis. It's that little flap of muscle that when we swallow, it closes over top of the trachea. The top of the trachea is called the glottis. And there we go, the epiglottis closes over and food goes that way, air can continue that way. When you're swallowing, you can't breathe. So, air enters through the nares. These are called the nares, the nasal cavity, and it can enter through the mouth. And then it travels to this region here at the back of the throat. This is called the pharynx. And the pharynx is it's sort of the way station. It's where the epiglottis, where the esophagus and the trachea meet. That's the pharynx, where you got all of these paths, all these roads here, see, are meeting together. They meet in the pharynx. And then air continues down. When the epiglottis is open, it continues down into the larynx. This is the larynx region. And it continues down in here. And in here are vocal cords. So this is a cool adaptation that humans have, is we have vocal cords. They're basically like thin bands, thin tendons that are attached to muscle. And by contracting that muscle and stretching the tendons, we can make our voices higher. We can make our voices really higher, and the tendons are really high, and they're really tense. Or we can make our voices lower, and we relax the tendons. There's a video in the notes. I wonder if I can get it to work here quickly. Open link. Let's see. And If it doesn't open quickly, it was, oh, yeah, there we go. Look at that. There it is. Students love this. There you go. You can watch that on your own, but that's the vocal cords contracting. That's the larynx. These are the vocal cords. That's the tendons making different sounds. Neat, eh? Okay, so continuing on. So we got the pharynx, got the larynx. Don't mix those up. Students often mix pharynx up with larynx. Pharynx, larynx. And then we continue on down the trachea. There it is in blue there. And it continues down to the, make sure I get this right, the bronchi. I always, for some reason, forget to say the word bronchi. So here's the bronchi. Now this is where the trachea branches off to head into the lungs. Now some interesting things that are happening here to the air. Immediately as the air is entering here, so when it enters your nose, this is the best way for air to get in here because there are lots of blood vessels up here. Tons and tons and tons of little capillaries and blood vessels. That's why you get a nosebleed so easily, is you rupture those little capillaries and stuff. And what they are there for, hold on, because I'm just going to take off my jacket because I'm getting really hot, which is what happens to the air. That's what those capillaries are for, is they are there to warm the air. So air enters here and it is warmed. Immediately it is warmed and it's also moist in here. Oh yeah, your moisty, mucousy areas in here. So air is warmed and moistened immediately as it goes in here. It needs to be warm and moist as it enters your body because you don't want it to be cooling, freezing your body in here. In fact, if any of you have lived in those, what I call real Canada, where it gets really, really cold, you probably learned about how important it is to cover your mouth and make sure you don't take deep gulps of minus 50 degrees centigrade air, because what can happen is you can damage your lungs. You can actually die from breathing air that's so cold. So we've got all those blood vessels being warmed. There's also lots of hairs here and cilia. Also cilia, I've talked about those before. Hairs here and cilia. And what those are doing, the hair that's in your nose hair and stuff like that, all the mucus and things that are in here, what that stuff is doing is it's filtering the air. So it's capturing any kind of bad things that are in the air, dust, asbestos, bacteria, viruses, all those things are being caught in here in these hairs. And as it heads down into the trachea, there's mucus in here and little cilia hairs that are doing this kind of thing. They're kind of doing it like that. And what they do is anything that makes it down, they capture it, and that wave-like motion and the mucus get pushed up, 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 up into here, and you swallow it down, right? You go, you swallow it down, and down it goes into your digestive system, into here, the stomach. Remember that stuff from the digestion unit, where there's all the stomach acids. So those hairs, those cilia, so as the air is traveling down the trachea, through the nares, down into the trachea, into the bronchi, it is being warmed, it is being filtered, it is being moistened. And then the bronchi, so those are the two big branches. One bronchi is called a bronchus. Those two big branches then branch off into smaller bronchi, which are called bronchioles. Bronchioles. And those branch off and branch off and branch off. The bronchioles branch off and branch off. And they branch off into these tiny, tiny little structures, and you have millions of these structures. You can't see them even here, but we can pretend. You see how this is all textured? I don't know if it's going to focus on it. It's all textured. This is a lung. It's all textured into something called alveoli. And gas exchange happens inside the alveoli. Oh, another thing that I need to say that I have forgotten to say that is important. The trachea and the bronchi and the bronchioles. No, not the bronchioles. Sorry, and the trachea and the bronchi, okay, trachea and bronchi, have these cartilaginous rings. So they're held together with cartilage. They're basically these rings keep it open. It's like a tube. You know, one of those tubes that you spin around when you were a kid? Did you ever have those? You guys have all electronic toys. I don't know. Maybe your parents were like anti-electronic toys, and they bought you like those old toys, like a tube, and it had little kind of like a accordion type thing, and you would spin it around and go. Ooh. That's the best toys that's the toys that we had. That's all we had. There was no computers. But anyways, so that's sort of like that. You can see sort of these rings here. They keep the trachea from collapsing and the bronchi from collapsing. The cartilaginous rings, they sort of end as we get into the bronchioles. Because the bronchioles get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until finally they get down to really, really tiny, and that's the alveoli. And here's a picture. So here's a picture of an alveoli. That's what they look like. They're these little sacs, see? So there's an alveoli, an alveoli, an alveoli. There's a little bronchiole. And they've got muscle bands around them, the bronchioles. That's probably what keeps them open, if I remember correctly. Do we want to go on? Well, let's just talk about a little bit more about the alveoli here. We have a close-up of it now. There's lots of wonderful stuff in here, so look through here. But you can see, look, what's all around the alveoli is arteries and veins. Remember, arteries and veins. There's a pulmonary artery and a pulmonary vein. Pulmonary artery is going to be carrying deoxygenated blood from which side of the heart? The right side of the heart. The right ventricle. Little reminder of your circulation unit. Don't forget any of that stuff. So from the right ventricle, deoxygenated blood enters these pulmonary capillaries. And here is where gas exchange happens between the walls of the alveoli and the pulmonary capillaries. They're all just one cell layer thick, the wall of the alveoli, and then those capillaries, the red blood cells will pick up oxygen here and drop off the carbon dioxide. And then you expire that carbon dioxide, inhale fresh oxygen. Air is only made up of like 21% oxygen, something like that, 21%, 20%, 21%. Some trace gases, and then a lot of nitrogen and trace CO2 as well. Trace gases is just like random gas, tiny amounts of random poisonous gases. I don't know. What else can we talk about alveoli? So there's millions of them. And basically, we talked about this a little bit here. So when the air arrives into the alveoli, it is really humid. It's been moistened that whole way through the bronchioles and stuff. It's been moistened, and it's been warmed up. So it's 37 degrees centigrade. Approximately 300 million alveoli in each human lung. There you go. In each human lung. So 600 million altogether, I guess. And basically, the alveoli, they increase the surface area, right? I think I talked about this, is if you took your lungs and stretched them out, they would take up the space of a tennis court. That's how much surface area you have. And the alveoli have to be moist. They also have a coating of lipoproteins. It's called a surfactant. And what those do is it keeps them open. It keeps them from gluing. Oh, look, Mr. Carmichael's here. Okay, I think we'll stop at alveoli.